Okay, welcome to the Scale Up Leader. I'm Richard Russell, your host. Today we're talking to Ben Legg. Ben actually started in the British Army originally, and then at McKinsey and Coca-Cola, followed by Google, where he was Chief Operating Officer of Europe, which is where I first met him. He held a number of Chief Operating, a Chief Executive role, and MD roles, mostly in ad tech companies, and since then has built an extensive portfolio career with board, advisory, and consulting roles for a number of organizations, mostly in sort of tech and startup and scale-up space. He's now the co-founder and CEO of the Portfolio Collective, where he helps people build portfolio careers and helps companies hire fractional talent. So I'll bring you on the screen, Ben. There you are. You're now on screen.
Hey,
How are you doing, Ben? Good to see you.
very well. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent. So in that intro, I mentioned a few words that probably aren't familiar to everybody. Portfolio career and fractional talent. Could you sort of
Yeah.
talk us through what you mean by these things?
Yeah, and the two are linked. So a portfolio career, really the clue is in the title. It means you make money in multiple ways rather than having just one salary. So if you think about if you're an investor, you have a portfolio of investments because it
Yep.
spreads your risk across multiple investments. So the idea of a portfolio career is you make money in lots of ways, which A, is very interesting, and B, helps you mitigate risk by having multiple revenue sources. In terms of fractional talent, it's basically people who work in a way that isn't a full-time job. So it could be part-time, like a day a week, 2 days a week, etc. Could be interim. You do
Yep.
a couple of months or a couple of weeks or whatever it might be, sort of standing in for someone. There's a lot of project work, consulting, etc. Working to get a job done and then backing off. And there's all sorts of other variants, within that, which could be board work. It could be sort of light touch advisory, could be expert networks where people sort of are just available for a call, a paid call as an expert. There's all sorts of ways that basically it's someone who works in a way that isn't full time.
And how did you go about getting into this in the first place? How did you make the transition from your full time
So,
and then?
yeah. It was kind of a long journey because arguably, so step one for a lot of people who want a portfolio career is a side hustle, meaning you're starting to make money on the side. Well, I've been making money on the side since I was a teenager, so I've always had some kind of scheme going on in different ways. And it started off, buying stuff, selling stuff, making stuff. There was a stint of property development. By the time I was in my kind of tech, CEO level, my portfolio career was starting to shape up before I quit my day job. And it really was the three buckets that still exist now, which is working with startups, working with investors, and thought leadership. So working with startups is a bit of angel investing, a bit of board work, a bit of advisory work, etc., quite a bit of mentoring.
Yep.
Working with investors is a mixture of helping investors find things to invest in, helping them screen those deals, or helping them understand the world or certain industries. And then thought leadership is basically teaching at a university, or I teach at Oxford, or speeches. And obviously the three are quite interlinked. I'm always talking about the digitization of an industry, or the future of an industry, or the future of society, or how would Google reinvent an industry, etc. So, and I think understanding startups makes you better at working with investors. Understanding investors makes you better at working with startups. So it fitted nicely together. But when I had a day job, realistically, I could only give my side hustles 5 to 8 hours a week because that's all I had time for. So when I ditched the day job, I suddenly had 40 plus hours a week to dedicate to all my favorite things.
Right. And when you did that, did you feel, was it like a big risk in terms of like ditching their day job? Obviously that's usually got some consistent pay. Is that a big risk for you?
So my wife and I would differ on this. She thought I was taking a crazy risk. I thought I was taking a manageable risk. It did work out. So it doesn't mean we don't still disagree. But basically, my side hustles, some of them at least, were quite lucrative. And so the biggest question mark is, would there be more volume if I had more time? Because there's a risk that you think, oh, great, I'm working 5 hours a week and getting paid a really good hourly rate. I'll ditch the day job and then there isn't any more work and you're still working 5 hours a week. That would have been a high risk. Like literally, my side hustle was bringing in about a third of what my salary was bringing in at the time I quit. And so I needed to triple my revenue from my side hustles as fast as I could. And luckily it worked out. One of the things we're doing with the Portfolio Collective is helping people do it in a more scientific manner, so that the risk goes down and the speed to full monetization goes up.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And do you advise people to sort of have that test it out first on the side, like a side hustle first, and then
if you can. I mean, the reality is not everyone has that luxury, but the neatest way, if you like to plan and don't like risk, the neatest way to launch a portfolio career is to get your side hustles up and running before you even contemplate, or certainly before you pull the plug on your day job. And by then you've worked out, what exactly am I selling? How much am I selling it for? What do my customers look like? You've probably built a website. You've worked out, how to do your taxes. You've probably got a legal entity. There's a whole load of the groundwork's done.
Yeah.
So in theory, when you have more time, you'll be able to scale it quite quickly. That's the dream. But obviously some people either quit or get laid off or whatever, and they just have to move faster because they haven't built the side hustles.
Yeah.
So quite frankly, one of the best ways to mitigate future revenue if you're in a full-time job is to find a side hustle. Even if you don't want a full portfolio career, anyone with a side hustle has massively reduced their risk compared to people that don't.
Are there types of side hustles that work better for moving into a portfolio career than others? Like, I mean, I imagine in some ways, if you had a side hustle that's like, I sell t-shirts online, it kind of, I guess it fits in, but it's not complementary to other kinds of other kinds of things that I might do in a portfolio, right? Or things you talked about. Of advisory.
But that one of the beauties of a portfolio career is you can make it whatever you want. So what you've just described there is, so we have these kind of 4 types of portfolio professional. There's the side hustler, still got the day job but doing something on the side. There's the freelancer, the person who effectively responds to brief. Their clients have a need, they outsource the work, you do it and get paid for it. There's the focused expert. This is someone who says, I'm going to be the best in the world at something, or the best in my industry, or the best in my town, or whatever it might be, in order to be sought out. These are the deep experts. It could be on anything. It could be on AI. It could be on the future of transportation. It could be on drone law. But you pick your subject and you double down it and you write. You're the one that wrote the book, makes the speeches, gets put on boards, gets asked to solve complex problems because you're the best at something. So that's number 3. The focused expert. And number 4 is the multi-hyphenate. These are the ones that do have multiple revenue streams that aren't necessarily related to each other, but that's just the way they want to live their life.
Yeah.
In fact, one of our members who we often hold up as a great example of a multi-hyphenate, her kind of main gig, which I think is like 2 or 3 days a week, is she's a career advisor at Oxford University, but she's also a B Corp lawyer. So she helps startups and companies get B Corp certification. She's also a circus entertainer.
Circus entertainer, that's pretty rad.
And she used to be in the, I think, New Zealand Olympic team for I forget which sport, but it's something really impressive too. So she clearly has said, within my life, I am going to do a lot of interesting things and they won't be related and I don't care. And it's working for her.
That's great. I mean, so I suppose that working for her is working for yourself is the point of this thing. As long as what you're doing works for you, it doesn't matter whether you're actually sort of making the same money as you would have done full time. It matters whether it works for you.
And with a portfolio career as well, it's not all about cash only. It's work-life balance. But there's also cash versus equity. So a lot of our members, and myself included, there'll be some jobs that pay cash. Others, you work with early stage startups that don't have any money or they're not much. So they might give you equity instead. And so you end up picking up stakes in very early stage companies and you get paid cash by the late stage companies. And one pays the bills and the other builds wealth over time. So a lot of portfolio professionals end up with multiple stakes in startups, and obviously some of them do well, and that's a form of long-term value creation. Yeah,
for sure. And I suppose in some ways, because of the risk factor there, you'd have to make sure that you're comfortable taking that risk on. That's just like investing in.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. But I do think the end state for a lot of portfolio professionals is you look a bit like a one-person VC, with 8 to 30, sort of small stakes in startups, and you hope one of them's the next Google, and then you're set for life. But certainly if the volume gets high enough, there should be something good comes out of it.
Yeah, and interesting. You mentioned earlier on about people being laid off and sort of going into this sort of like unexpectedly. When it's ideal if you've set this up in advance, but if you haven't, is there any particular advice for getting started? So right now, obviously, there's the layoffs are sort of like happening in the news frequently. I think today was Stripe, Twitter today as well, although that's
it's everywhere. So the first advice, which is a bit late for people being laid off today, is you should have started 2 years ago, because ultimately I think it's way too high risk. If you really think about the future of work and think about how many full-time employees companies will have in the future, it's a lot less than now. Why? Because most work, it's very hard to say, I need this work done 365 days a year by someone with a similar skill set day in, day out. Why? Because some work gets automated. You don't need a full-time person anymore. Some work gets outsourced. You don't need a full-time worker anymore. Some companies merge with other companies. Suddenly, you don't need everyone anymore. You change your business model. There's so much change that being able to say, I need this work done 365 days a year, or even 200 days a year, but basically enough to justify a full-time employee, is going down and down and down and down and down because of the pace of change. And more people will do fractional work, and it doesn't need to be scary. So, yeah, as all these full-time jobs go, what are the companies going to do when they restaff? It's not going to be all full-time roles. A lot of the work they're going to get done will be with fractional stuff. So the key is, I think everyone who wants to manage their risk and manage their career should have a side hustle. Coming back to your question, if you've just been laid off and you didn't have a side hustle, what do you do? I would categorically say join the Portfolio Collective, and that's not a sales pitch. That's a lifeline. This is the ring I'm throwing into the water.
Yeah.
Because we actually we launched at the beginning of lockdown the first time around, because I was overwhelmed by people saying, either I've been laid off or I've quit. I need a career like yours. How do I do it? And the first thing we did was built the right courses to start your portfolio career, because it can take time and you can't wing this. This is to be a successful one-person entrepreneurial company and not get commoditized. It takes hard work. You got to really reflect on yourself and say, what are my skills? What are my passions? Who are my customers? Yeah. What am I actually selling? What's my product or service? How much am I charging for it? How do I differentiate versus others? How do I keep a pipeline of stuff, for the foreseeable future? How do I keep adapting based on market needs, pricing, etc.? You are a one-person company. You've got to write your own strategy, do your own marketing, do your own sales, set your own prices, do your own fulfillment. Now, you can collaborate with others, and a lot of people do. But again, that's the beauty of a community, is you can find other people to collaborate with, so you're not on your own. But trying to work it all out on your own is just crazy. There are now places to go to learn how to do it.
I laugh partially because I did that on my own,
so did I.
Probably like you.
Yeah. Collective existed then. It's like, how many mistakes did you make?
All of them. I made all of them. I started out targeting like large companies, and then I started out targeting local Luxembourg companies. I'm based in Luxembourg, and I thought these companies would be ideal, and established companies, and then doing early stage startups, and then trying to do a different product, and then coaching, and then all sorts of different things. And each one of these things is initially when I started, it was kind of more like I can do a lot of stuff. Let's do some stuff. And I have a lot of things that I can do for people. So I'm sure I'll find something, but it just no one understands what stuff is, right? So I had to be really specific about it. Then you have to test, okay, I can help you with innovation. I can help you with leadership coaching. I can help you with OKRs. And it took me a long time to sort of figure out where the sweet spot was. And in some ways, I, for some reason, resisted every single piece of good advice until I had to do it. And then I did it. And, I got some help with various people doing doing my admin stuff, like the stuff that causes me headaches, and helping with marketing and so on. But also just like selecting the right customers that I work with and the right work. Sure. And I love what I do. It's great. And I have a clear vision of what it is that I can talk about. So you talk about like the pipeline and knowing what you're selling to who and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, that's exactly where I'm at. So it's amazing. I would have loved to have joined the Portfolio 5 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And you find time to do this podcast, which is I think I get the impression, one of your passion projects, but B, probably builds your brand too. So it's like your passions and your business become kind of intertwined in a way that personally I love. It's like there's a lot less boundaries. I know historically people said, I'm 9 to 5, I belong to the company, and out of that I belong to my family or whatever. And you just kind of muddle it in, but you're a lot more flexibility to how you do it. And what is networking versus friends? I don't know. I work with my friends. Are they clients or friends? They're both. I'm fine with that.
This is actually one of the transitions I had, going from making all the mistakes. I was like frustrated about, I don't even like you people, but I'm trying to figure out how to sell to you, but I don't really want to do that work. And now I'm just mostly enjoying myself, and I get to do hard things that I really enjoy, that add a lot of value, and then people appreciate it, and it's really good. So I understand that, and I do wish it was around that many years ago. Although I wonder whether I was receptive to the advice at the time, because I had other people giving me that advice too. But I was going to we talked a lot about from the individual, like the individual's perspective, like the employee or the portfolio career. I guess, perspective. Who hires these people, and why do they hire them, and why would you do it and not have them 100% dedicated?
So the answer is almost anyone, but where we're having the most success is startups, scale-ups, and VCs. So basically younger, smaller companies who are A, really open to new ways of working, and B, don't have enough cash to hire a full-time senior management team.
Yeah.
So if let's say you're a Series A startup and you've just raised 10 million quid, do you really want to be hiring a senior management team of 10 people earning 200 grand a year each? That's 2 million a year each before you've even hired any frontline workers who do actual real work. The answer is no, you don't. So what do? You have to get clever. And you say, right, do you know what? I'm not going to have 10 senior people. I'll have 2 or 3 senior people who are probably, possibly full-time. But then for some functions or teams, I'll have someone who's a bit more junior. Or part-time. I might have a part-time finance director. I'll have, instead of having a chief people officer, I'll have a head of HR who is probably not experienced enough, but I'll find her a mentor to fill in the gaps. And so you say, right, I'll sort of maybe have a few more permanent people who are junior, but the senior people can be fractional because I can't afford a whole one. But the senior people help the junior people succeed through advisory boards, mentoring, coaching, consulting, etc. And kind of just always trying to work out the optimal mix of senior, junior, fractional, and full-time. So that's where we're having the most success. Now, arguably what I've just said should be done by other organizations too. But big companies often take a while to realize that not everything needs to be done by full-time employees. Government can take too long, etc. But the reality is the way startups are working is the way all organizations will work over time, where you do always still have that core of full-time people who live and breathe the brand and the business, etc. But then whenever they have a project or a surge of work, they go and find some portfolio professionals one way or another, or a team of them, whether it's an individual or a team. They get the work done. They do the brief, they do the quality control, but at the end of the day, they pay the individuals go on their way. And it's just a more flexible, more efficient way of working. But for now, 90% of our clients, because we have clients too who come to us looking for talent, 90% are well-funded startups, basically.
Yeah. Would it be the case that when you get to the large organization, especially at the senior level, that barrier of I can't afford a whole person goes away because I'm a big organization. So then I only have a smaller number of reasons to do this. Is that the case? And so
it's absolutely the case. Yeah. So we've worked with maybe 1 or 2 Series C companies, but none beyond that yet. Partly we're not pitching, and partly there's less of them, but partly they kind of feel like I can afford whoever I want to do whatever I want. Now that does lead to some sloppy thinking, because the reality is there's still a lot of work where they don't need a full-time person. Especially at crazily high salaries. So they will come around to it too. And if they don't, it doesn't stress them too much, because the current Series A and Series B companies are the Series C, Series D companies of the future, and they've learned to work the smart way already. So effectively, we're taking over the world one way or another.
Excellent. I guess it's a sort of like a financial question, but if you're talking about someone who's a full-timer at 200,000 a year, and I'm getting someone in for a day a week, what am I paying them?
So that's a great question, and it varies a lot. But if people are coming in for a short-term project, the normal rule of thumb is you can charge about twice what you would earn if you were in a full-time job. So if we take that number of 200 grand a year, I'm going to really round things to simplify the maths, but that's about $1,000 a day. That you're earning if you work 200 days in a year. It's a bit more, but let's keep the maths simple.
Maths simple as maths.
But actually, that's not what you cost the company. Because the company probably paid a headhunter to hire you. They've spent a fortune inducting you. They pay you on the days you're not working, whether you're sick or on vacation. They pay for you to be trained multiple times a year. They pay probably some form of social security. They put money into your pension. There's like a whole load of additional costs. Now, there's a general rule of thumb for HR people that employees cost about twice what their base salary is. So from that angle, that person who thinks he or she is earning £1,000 a day or dollars a day is actually costing the company about twice that. And that's why kind of fractional talent, if you get someone for a 5-day project, they'll probably charge twice what they would have done if they had a day job, like a full-time job. Now, what then happens is when you get longer term commitments, your rates come down, because predictability has a value to the worker as well as to the employer. So let's say you were given a board job for 2 days a month for the foreseeable future, a few years. You probably wouldn't charge out that full rate because there's some predictability in there. So what that then does, that saves you, let's say, sales time and effort, because you put 2 days of your month are taken up. So the longer the commitment, the lower the rate comes down. But the reality is your rate never comes down to what you would get paid if you had a full-time job, because you now need to take care of your own pension. You
Yes.
don't get sick pay, etc. So realistically, you should always be charging at least 30% more than than you would if you're in a day job. In a
Right.
full-time job.
So in that 200,000 a year, you said that's 1,000 a day. So you'll be
Yeah.
charging, if it's like a longish term contract, probably 13
Yeah.
to 1,500 a day, something
Yeah.
like that. If it's a short term sort of thing, maybe 2,000 a day. But that works
Yeah.
out to be sort of pro rata, similar to what the company would be paying for a full-time person. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, obviously, with a portfolio, you do mix up, and all our members and myself mixed up. So, yeah, I do some work for companies that have no money. I just take sweat equity. So technically, there's no cash. If that company folds, I've just worked for free. If the company does brilliantly, obviously, I get some upside. So you can do that, or you can say, do you know what? I really want to help this company. They can't afford my full day rate. I'll charge them at half my day rate, and then I'll go and put my rates up somewhere else. So you can really play around with the portfolio. And what you'll find is most portfolio professionals will charge more either for the work they don't like doing. It's like, well, I don't like it, I'll charge more for it. Or for the work where they are a known expert. So they're like low risk to the client. I've done this 10 times before, which often is the stuff they don't like because they're getting bored of that stuff. And they'll charge less for the stuff they're breaking into, because most portfolio professionals are already evolving their portfolio. So a simple example for me, I can charge more for work around advertising because I worked in it for 10, 15 years and was successful, versus if I go and work in education or healthcare. But I find education and healthcare fascinating. So I do work there, but with slightly lower rates.
Right. Okay. Interesting. If I've got an education startup, I should hire Ben because I'll get it a bargain. So what about like in terms of like someone who's thinking about hiring, like we're going through a process, we decided we can't hire a full-time person and they're thinking about doing this. How do I go about this? Like what advice would you give a CEO who's thinking of hiring a fractional CMO, or and for that matter, is it sensible does it work better in particular verticals like CMO versus CP, Chief Product Officer or People Officer?
Yeah, good question. So if I start with the where do you go, there are lots of places out there. So obviously the Portfolio Collective is one, so they can come to us and say, I've got this need, can you help? There are other platforms out there. So there are platforms, for example, for ex-strategy consultants. There are platforms out there for fractional finance people. So there are other platforms out there. They tend to be more matchmaking. We have talent, you have a need, put it in and do the match. So if you want a quick match, then that can be great. We tend to like sort of say, let's go on a journey together and we'll help you with all your talent over a long period of time. So it's more consultative, but they all have their pros and cons. So I think if you don't know where to go, talk to someone like me and we'll say, right, there's us, there's this platform, this platform, this platform, this platform. So there are platforms out there. And the talent's there too. And, if in doubt, go to LinkedIn, but you might find it harder. The platforms have gathered the right talent with the right skills. So typically it's an easier place to go. In terms of which verticals work better, the answer is probably they all do, but the ones where we've seen the most work, interestingly, finance, there's a lot of fractional finance people, because a lot of smaller companies realize they don't need a full-time finance person. Tech and product, definitely. A lot of techies, like computer scientists, love working as contractors, interims, project managers, etc. It's almost like they come out of university and do that, for most of their career. So, getting fractionals, CTOs, fractionals, head of product, it seems to be relatively normal for a lot of small companies. But I've seen fractional people in sales, marketing, PR, partnerships, obviously tech, finance, HR. Pretty much everything except CEO, probably.
All right, fractional CEO doesn't work so well, unless you're Elon Musk and you're fractional everywhere that you own.
Actually, that's fair. He's fractional, and to be fair, I do have a day job. It's running the portfolio collective. I still keep my side hustles, partly because it's practically what I preach. If I preach portfolio careers, I can't ditch the side hustles. Partly the side hustles pay the bills. Partly I like it, quite frankly. So I do, and I do know a lot of early stage founders will still keep some side hustles because the side hustles pay the bills while they build their company.
Yeah. So, but then it's more of a owner / CEO, fractional CEO.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So interesting. That makes sense. And what about so when you're hiring someone like this, you got the idea of where do I go to find someone? But do I need to do anything before I do that, or after I do when I'm hiring them? Is there something different to do when I'm onboarding someone?
Yes, it depends on where you go, but absolutely, it's a good question. So you need to have what we don't do. For example, we don't say, "Give me a job description, I'll fill it for you." because then the job description is nearly always wrong, quite frankly, first time around. So you really do need to think through, not I need a fractional finance director or I need a interim COO. You need to say, what's the work that needs to get done?
Right.
Which might sound obvious, but a lot of people don't do that. They'll say, what's the job description?
Yeah.
Job description comes 2 or 3 steps later. Yeah, it's what's the work? If it's finance, is it just accounting? In which case, you could outsource that to an accounting firm, or it could be a junior person. Yeah, I get a lot of people raise Series A and say, I need a CFO. I say, no, you don't. You're a 20-person company. You do not need to pay 200 grand to a head of finance. Your finance department is not that complicated. Let's take a look at the work. If it's FP&A like analytics, forecasting, etc., you need a really good person, possibly in-house, maybe not full-time, and certainly not a CFO. It's more junior than that. You start needing a senior finance person when they're going to own fundraising, international expansion, crazily complex partnerships, buying or building factories. That's when you start needing a CFO, because finance becomes complicated. And then you still need to work out fractional or full-time. So you always start off with what's the work that needs to get done. Is it long-term or short-term? Is it fractional or full-time? Is it senior, mid-level, junior? And then write the job description. But before you go to platforms, you need to know what you're looking for. Again, one of the things we do is we actually help that thought process, because a lot of founders are still working stuff out as they go along. They've often never even run a team before, let alone run a company. And so they don't necessarily know what good finance looks like, which is why they often start with that crazy statement, I need a CFO.
Especially when you're still like your first hires and you're slowly growing the company. It's like
exactly. Most founders need help with most functions, because maybe they might just about know engineering if they're an engineer, but even then they don't necessarily know what a competent engineering function looks like. They know what good code looks like. There's a big difference between that and building a team.
Yeah, exactly. There's that whole sort of like what does a great engineering VP look like? And it's very hard to do that if you haven't sort of been in that role or whatever.
Been it or worked for one or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And does this concept extend? Like I was just thinking about, especially legal. Legal is the kind of thing where we have a very long history of you normally wouldn't have in-house lawyers, especially until you get very large.
You
just go to a law firm and get a lawyer. A crazy hourly rate, but at least they're there, right? And you get someone who's an expert in this kind of thing. Some of these things you might not even need a person. You might just need someone to do some
hours. Absolutely, and certainly that's what most startups do with their lawyers. Is they'll work with lawyers, and actually, so we work with a lawyer who used to be part of a firm. He's now a portfolio professional himself, and he specializes in helping early stage startups. And I know about 6 founders who use him. So he's I don't know how many clients he's got. He's worked 20 or 30 clients. And he's a portfolio professional lawyer with a specialist in early stage startups.
No, that's great. That's that makes I guess it makes a very interesting career, doesn't it? I mean, I guess that's part of the point of this. And from the company perspective, then, do you have examples of like where this has worked out really well, like specifically where they've gained that's something they couldn't get by hiring a permanent or couldn't afford, and just something specific?
So I'll give you an example. We recently wrote a case study for one of our clients there's a company called Cloud NC. They are now a Series B company. It's very cool, actually. It's an autonomous manufacturing company. So they effectively use AI to make parts out of metal faster than it's ever been done before, with less human intervention. So it kind of speeds things up, takes costs out, accelerates from design to manufacture. Anyway, very cool company. Not that I ever thought I'd work in manufacturing, but when I was asked, would I mentor the founder? And I said yes, and we got on really well, and it's fascinating. So we started working with them just over a year ago. They were a Series A company running out of cash. I think they had about 3 months of money left. So they knew they had problems, a lot of chaos. The head of HR had just quit. There was a lot of friction in the team between the VP of engineering and the CTO. All sorts of just usual growing pains of friction, gaps in the management team, and not fully joined up process between strategy and execution. That's your specialty. Of how do you fill that gap? And so usual stuff, but when you're running out of money, it's hard. So I started mentoring the founder, and we said, well, we need to fix some of these things, but it's kind of immoral to basically offer long-term contracts to anyone when you've got 3 months of money left. So we said, but we need to do better on strategy. We brought in a portfolio professional to run a strategy offsite. That helped clarify what we were trying to do. We realized HR was the most broken function, so we brought in an interim head of HR to run the function. We then started doing the Series B raise, which ended up being successful, 35 million. But obviously, you never know when you start that process.
Yeah.
And the founder said, "I think I need a CFO." He's the usual thing. I said, "No, you've got this head of finance who's really smart and such a fast learner. How about we just get him a mentor rather than hiring a CFO?" So we did. So we found a mentor. Then the Series B kind of landed, money in the bank, woohoo. And we helped them fire in a couple of full-time roles, so a VP of product and a chief of staff. But then we've been tucking in other portfolio roles. So I've lost track of the numbers, but I think in the last year, we've probably found them about 6 or 7 portfolio professionals and 2 or 3 full-time professionals.
Yeah.
But that's probably the kind of ratio that companies should be thinking about. When do you have fractional versus full-time? So it really is pragmatic. It's not all either or. A company full of part-timers will never have the coherence and the glue that you need for a company.
Yeah.
But the companies all full-time will be slow and wasteful and just way too expensive and not flexible enough. So get the right people in the core team, but then flex with portfolio professionals. You can grow costs, shrink costs, point in a different direction. It's so much easier if you've got a small core head count and know how to manage portfolio professionals.
Do you find many of these people who hire portfolio professionals, or many portfolio professionals, convert from being fractional or temporary to being permanent full-time? Does that ever happen?
Yeah. Yes. So there's lots of motivations for portfolio professionals, and this is not fully scientific. We've got 7,500 members, so we've got decent data. But I would hazard a guess that about 60% of our members actually just want a portfolio career. They're done with corporate life. They want the flexibility. They want the portfolio career. About 20% are using a portfolio career as a stepping stone out of corporate life. They want to launch a startup, and they see a portfolio career as a great form of flexibility to find time and shape their career and their focus to launch a startup. And about 20% are just kind of sick of corporate life, but kind of are still okay with the idea of a full-time job.
Yeah.
And what we often find is they're the ones that when a Series B comes along with an amazing mission, cool founder, and a really good and often well-paid opportunity, they'll say, "Actually, I wasn't fed up with full-time work. I was fed up with being part of a big corporate machine. And this is a cool company trying to change the world. Where do I sign?" So absolutely. And so it's kind of it's messy, but that's part of the joy of it. Is people have very different motivations. It's not like you can say this is a career path for a portfolio professional, because some people want to keep developing as a portfolio professional. Some people will dip in and out of full-time work with interesting gaps. Some people will mostly work on their side hustle and then one day quit the job and explode the side hustle. Some people are comfortable drifting into retirement and actually earning a bit less over time, but working a bit less too. So some people are ramping up, some down, some sideways. Everyone chooses their own path, and as long as you put enough effort in, you can normally make it happen.
And changing that path as you go is part of the whole thing, right? Because you're sort of like opening optionality, able to make things as form them into what you need and what suits. I know for me,
one of our members who's a real wordsmith. We have a lot of interesting debates in our community, and said, "Is it even a career? Because you're really a one-person company." You think of career, but a career is almost like, well, you're getting promoted by other people and trained by other people. As a portfolio professional, you decide what you learn. You decide how much you get paid. You want a pay rise? Work it out. It's not hard. Just go and work it out. So it's like you're actually a company, but it feels wrong. So I still use career. I still think of it as a career, but maybe I'm old-fashioned too, and maybe it's just we're all one-person companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so I certainly think I don't really think of myself as having a portfolio career, although I guess I kind of do, in that most of my work is the same kind of thing. It's like I've got the same product same service that I sell, and then I have 2 or 3 services really, and then every now and again I do a bit of coaching here and there. And actually, it is it's a portfolio company, but I think of this as a portfolio professional kind of thing. But I'm also trying to build a company and trying to build. I'd like to grow this to a point where I have a few people with me. And my goal, like one of the reasons why I do this is because I'm sick of corporate life, as many people are. But they're not necessarily in a really cynical way. I actually quite enjoy companies in the way they work. I just know that if I'm in a company for more than 6 months, I get bored and frustrated, and I want to change something, and I want to find something new. And so what I'm doing, I get the opportunity to go from one project and one company to another. And so I in the last sort of year, I've worked with a company doing pet insurance, a company doing pensions, a company doing video encoding, a company doing car chargers, a oil field services company and an e-commerce company and a tax software company. Like it's just so quite random and different things. And I just love it because every time I go in, I'm like, oh, there's some new thing I can learn. And I learn something about that. And then every time I go to a new company, because I've had this experience of going to lots of different companies, they're sort of like, that's a unique value that you bring. It's like, I can really rapidly pick things up and sort of understand how your business relates to the patterns that I've seen around the place.
Yeah.
But don't give me a full-time job because I'm going to get bored and frustrated. And it's not that I'm special or unique or wonderful and I'm so clever that I'm going to get bored with your menial stuff. That I just don't have the attention span. Like, kind of don't have the attention span, but it's just not what I want to do.
A lot of people are easily bored, and in a portfolio career, that's easier to manage if it's a portfolio career. But to your point around, is it a career or is it a company? Within my portfolio career, I have a fractional chief of staff, a fractional analyst, a fractional market researcher. They all work for me now and again, but they all have their other parts of their portfolio too. But typically, I like to be the primary one, so I get the most attention. But basically, my portfolio career is actually a small consulting firm, but everyone within that firm is a portfolio professional.
Yeah, interesting. So if we meet people within your firm and we want to hire them, we can. It's okay.
Yeah, totally.
We're not poaching from you. We're just
exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, and so I was going to ask you one other thing about from the company perspective as well. Like when we're doing this, like we talked about the hiring process. Once I'm getting someone on board, like I'm getting someone, is there something I need to line up to make this work differently? Like, so if I know what my onboarding process is, and it takes 6 weeks to onboard someone, and I've got someone for 2 days a week, does that then suddenly take that much longer, or what do I do?
It's a great question. One of the things working with portfolio professionals does, actually just like working remotely, is it forces everyone to be better managers.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you can't just expect people to turn up and look over their shoulder and sort of steer it from over the shoulder. You need to be much better. All managers, whether it's, I'd say, working with remote employees or portfolio professionals, need to be much clearer at giving a clear brief. Yeah?
Yes.
What is it that you want to get done? What are the goals? What are the boundaries? What other resources can you work with? Who's the team and how are they going to work together? What are the KPIs? And if you don't know all of that, you talk to the portfolio professional and say, I would like you to come back with a charter or whatever. So maybe you write your own charter, maybe you'll give them one.
Yeah.
But you need to be much better at that. But I think that's definitely part of the new world. Weak managers have been found out massively over the last couple of years since lockdown. And they're all the ones trying to get their employees back in the office now 5 days a week, is because they're still weak managers.
Yeah.
Because stronger managers are absolutely fine, giving people clear briefs, judging people based on output rather than input, etc. But I'm not anti-FaceTime. I love FaceTime. I'm very sociable. But it doesn't need to be 5 days a week unless you're working in a hotel or something and you actually service customers, unless you're a weak manager. And so it's really interesting to see who's forcing employees back into the office versus not. That's a whole nother debate. We don't necessarily need to go there. But to your question, you need to be really good at onboarding people quickly, briefing them clearly, having really good touch points, having dashboards that you're aligned around, having check-ins with the appropriate frequency, so that to the extent possible, the portfolio professional is always doing valuable work, doesn't go in the wrong direction or get lost.
Yeah, it's interestingly, I mean, that's like a lot of the work that I do is with managers about how they manage that kind of thing, how you set out the objectives, the key results, the KPIs, the metric stacks, and weekly business review, and that kind of thing. And that's just, as you say, it's just good management, right? I mean, it's just it's kind of just that, but that ends up being quite a difficult thing, for people to do and to adapt to as a growing company. And you have to be I guess you're making the point that you have to be particularly good at that in a hybrid environment or a portfolio or a fractional environment, because you have these constraints about the communication that you have with people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So I'm going to ask you one question on a completely different topic, which we haven't before, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. Which is basically you've got a career, your portfolio career, and your career previously. You've got a whole lot of work that you've done in different. What sort of advice do you tend to give leaders in companies? When you come into a company, when you first as a advisor or as a board member or as a coach or whatever you're doing, fractional, right? What is it that you sort of start with when you are trying to add value rapidly? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure I've ever fully written it down, but most of the people I work with are the founders of well-funded startups, and I'm often introduced to the founder by the VC saying, "Just giving this girl 10 million, 20 million. Can you help them spend it well?" And so the first thing I normally say is, what did you promise to get that money? You know,
Right. What was the promise you made to get the money?
can I see the investor deck? You know, what are you trying to build? And then saying, okay, you know, have you written the plan? Because obviously there's a big difference between an investor deck and a real plan.
Yeah.
But a lot comes down to, because startups think in stages. Like there's, you know, and it's the fundraising stages: seed, Series A, Series B, maybe C, but at some stage there's profitability. Then maybe at a later stage there's IPO or exit or whatever. So there's stages, and they're typically 2 or 3 years. It's like I focus a lot around. So what are you going to get done in that next 2 or 3 years? How much money have you got to do it? What's what's the strategy that you need? What's the team you need? What's the organization you need? What are the KPIs you're going to measure? What are the risks? How do they go wrong? And it's always comes back to that strategy, planning, execution, review, strategy, planning, execution, review, with an enormous amount of focus from my angle on teams. So I think where I've typically found I add the most value, and I don't know how much is founders being weak or me being good or just the way startups work, but I probably spend half my time talking to founders about team and org. You know, where are the gaps in the team? What's working? What's not working? As you scale, what are the priority hires? You know, if you had to swap people out, why would you? Who would it be and why? You know, are all the people from the last stage scaling with the new one? Because there's different skill sets. You know, getting a company from from nothing to MVP is very different to getting from MVP to scalable, etc. Like it's different skill sets and passions. So is everyone scaling well? And then even when you've got the people, and even if they're all working, it's like, how well are they working together? Does everyone understand the mission, the vision, the strategy? Has everyone got clear goals? Are there messy boundaries between teams, or are they neat? So you know a lot of this. I mean, it's like a lot of your data too, and it's just constantly end to ending. What are we trying to achieve? And how's it going, and how do we fix it? And it's always talking about cash, strategy, planning, execution, people, review, repeat kind of thing, with a bit of product marketing and fundraising thrown in along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
But my standard sort of because I do a lot of mentoring calls with founders, my standard first question is, what's on your mind? What's keeping you awake at night? Because typically founders, for all their faults, and they have many, and I am one, but they normally, the things they're keeping awake at night are typically the most important things in the company that week. Because there aren't many founders who don't realize if they're running out of cash, or don't realize if there's friction or whatever. So just surfacing it. I don't turn up with a playbook and say, you do A, then you do B, then you do C, then you do. It's like, let's do a quick check-in every week or every 2 weeks, depending on how frequently I talk to them. Where are we? What's working? What's not working? What are the priorities? I'll always challenge the priorities. Maybe I'll see something they don't, but typically they kind of know what's frustrating them, worrying them, and then we'll zoom in on those.
Yeah, it's interesting, that whole thing about asking them what the challenges, right? They usually know in some way, shape, or form. One thing I've also found, and this is something that I learned working with managers just in companies, but it also really applies with my clients, is if they've got something on their mind, then we kind of need to address that because it's on their mind. And if it's not, if we don't address that, then we can't
talk about something else because their mind won't be with you.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of and often enough, they know what's on their mind right now, and they know it's not the most important thing, but it's on their mind, and they've got to deal with it. And so, so that's also really important too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, thanks for the conversation, Ben. I really enjoyed this. I found it really fascinating. Hopefully people listening to this, we've recorded this. We're going to share it live next week. So next week will be this week. Whatever. When you're seeing this, it's next week, right? Whatever. We'll have some videos of this as well. If anyone is listening and wants to get in touch with you, perhaps hire someone from Portfolio Collective, or to start a portfolio career, or to hire a fractional Ben, what should...
So for me, I just Google Ben Legg. It's Legg, or for the Portfolio Collective, just Google it. You'll find us very easily. Our SEO is great. And ping me, and very happy to chat.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much, Ben. Great to talk to you, and I'll see you next time I see you.
Likewise.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. I'll just finish the recording there. End recording.